The abduction phenomenon has been defined as cases in which one or multiple witnesses are held captive by aliens inside their so-called crafts. Over time, however, these cases, once seemingly explicit, have become far more omniscient and stealthy, to the point that David Jacobs updated his definition to:
abduction is an alien-initiated interaction with a human during which the alien controls a human both physically and cognitively in real time and in any location.
We won't enter the historical dispute over which was the first modern abduction. All too often, new cases surface that predate Antonio Villas-Boas. The focus is on a difficult and often overlooked aspect in the field, the coincidences of names of people and places. Sometimes these coincidences are so specific that, to me, the idea of pure chance must be ruled out entirely. These coincidences work as semiotic linkages, reinforcing the sense of strong planning in such operations. The apparent random element is probably not random at all. The basic elements of the Hills case are well known. Barney and Betty Hill went for a weekend trip without much justification. On the way back, driving through mountains and deserted roads, a UFO followed them, took control of their car, and brought them on board. The abduction happened in a place called an Indian Head Resort, but the UFO got close to them since they crossed a small town called Ashland. Barney didn't remember a thing between Ashland and Indian Head. This is an important detail that will be pivotal for this discussion. The Hills case is considered the first official abduction in American soil, according to most ufologists, even if others had happened before. It remains the placeholder in the ufological discourse. The core of the Hills case were strange examinations that seemed just slightly more advanced than ours, and a sense of undesirable mind control or being treated like lab mice. That was in 1961. The second case that gained notoriety came from Herbert Schirmer, a sheriff's deputy in Nebraska. It was in 1967, during the Condon Committee period. While patrolling an open, deserted area, he saw a light he thought was a plane in trouble. He stopped, only to realize it was a UFO. As he stood there, a tall, strange-looking, human-like alien approached and asked if he was the watchman of the town. Herbert was taken on board, but unlike the Hills, the medical examinations were not the core of the case. The core was the metaphysical discussion that unfolded. Soon after the teachings, he found himself outside again, forgetting what had happened. But upon arriving at the police station, he noticed two things. He was 50 minutes late, and some physical effects, such as a terrible headache, a strange buzzing in his head, and a red mark on his neck. In the weeks that followed, Herbert began to remember more of what had happened on the craft. But there is an important detail I have so far omitted: the name of the place where Herbert's encounter took place. Ashland, Nebraska. The other important aspect was the difference in tone of his experience. The third case comes from 1967 as well, the Andreasen case. It would be the third most important case, chronologically, that wasn't investigated until 1973. Betty Andreasen was taken from her home in Ashburnham, Massachusetts. Her abductors were greys, similar to the beings in Betty Hill's encounter. But her discussion with the beings was more in line with Herbert's, metaphysical in tone. She was also examined, just as Betty Hill had been. However, the beings were more like the greys, as in the Hills case, instead of the strange, tall, human extraterrestrials dressed in spacesuits like in Schirmer's. Now we can address the coincidences. The first is obvious, Betty and Betty, but more striking are the names of the towns. The first two are both Ashland. The third is different, but still in complete thematic harmony with what happened in the case. Let's look at the relevance of Ashland and Ashburnham. In Portuguese, ash means both ash and the color grey. So Ashland could literally be read as the land of the greys. In the case of Ashburnham, there's a twist. In Andreasen's case, the discussion is deeply spiritual and the theme of burning appears at least twice. So the name can be read as Ash Grey, Burnham, Hamlet, a small rural settlement, which was rich in sophisticated spiritual imagery, much of it aligned with Gnosticism and early mystical traditions, none of which she had ever studied or knew to exist. I don't recall who first noticed the Ashland coincidence, if anyone. I've read so many books, magazines, and watched so many videos that a few times sources blur together over time. But there is a further layer to the Ashland term. The first Ashland case was in 1961, but the term grey wasn't even used in ufology until about 15 years later, what implies that they already nudged towards such meaning beforehand. The implications are staggering. From this single excerpt, it's not enough to conclude definitively, but across the entire series of contacts, a clearer picture emerges. The coordination and consistency suggest that a single group is responsible for abductions. The changes in appearance imply a non-essentialist approach that can present themselves in whatever form suits their chosen gameplay. They act in a very consistent manner, always using some type of plausible deniability, and here they connect cases across their supposed different species, and it's not a game with a clear functional purpose. It's a palimpsest. If on the surface they want ova, sperm, or to deliver messages about the future, on a deeper level they hint at total access to planning across vast spans of time and space. They encourage certain theories only to discard them later, showing that their interest lies more in displaying godlike power rather than a need for resource extraction or colonization. They signal toward control over time, content, and meaning. For example, the first correlation they promoted was the increase in sightings as Mars approached. After less than a decade, they disrupted this pattern. Then Aimé Michel identified orthoteny, sightings appearing along straight lines, seemingly to draw attention to deliberate placement. At least 3 sightings with a line, allowing geometry to be drawn. Then, having made the point, they abandoned this pattern too. The message is consistent. They control when patterns appear, when they disappear, and what meaning they carry in the moment. So we come up with a pattern as intent. It proposes the case for ulterior planning in these events. Parallel to this, we have a pattern as symbolic intrusion, showing that even in the naming, there's a manipulation of meaning. There's also the idea of escalation through the time sequence, case 1, case, hills. Physical examination plus partial metaphysical undertone. Case 2, Shermer. Pure metaphysical talk, examination barely important or omitted. Case 3, Andrea Sorn. A hybrid, both examination and metaphysical content, but with the metaphysical being far more elaborate. That progression almost mirrors a scripted escalation, as if the phenomenon, or whoever orchestrates it, is moving its dialogue with witnesses from physical control. Mental spiritual probing, full-blown symbolic initiation. The idea of burn in Ashburnham connects not just to spirituality, but to purification by fire, which in many mystical traditions is the final stage of transformation. And it's striking that this is the case with the most sophisticated spiritual content. That makes it almost look like the place name itself predicts the depth of the encounter. That's intentional patterning by the phenomenon. It's a theatrical kind of control. The resource to semiotic threading, the Ashland-Ashburnham connection, isn't just linguistic. It is tied to the content of the encounters and the evolution of the phenomenon's presentation. That makes the place names feel like deliberate narrative markers. Then we have the case sequencing. Hilla Shermer, Andreasen forms an almost staged escalation from physical intrusion to purely metaphysical engagement, to a synthesis of both, and the place names match the thematic content. Pattern proposal and abandonment as theatre. The Mars proximity and orthoteny examples show that the phenomenon can create a pattern, allow it to be noticed, and then abandon it, which itself becomes a message. It's as if they're demonstrating control over the rules of the game. Non-essentialist morphology. The same group can alter their form to suit the desired gameplay. They connect the abduction cases with the larger UFO theatricality discussed before. However, this deserves a larger pattern for a more in-depth discussion. It seems that the phenomenon's primary aim is symbolic dominance over time, space, and meaning, rather than resource extraction or colonization. However, it would be a massive simplification to deny that, after these performative coincidences, which act as placeholders, abductions began to surge in a far more raw and focused way. What followed was the metaphor of hybridism and activation through sexual and intimate contact. The ritualization of examinations, sexual encounters, demonstrations of the craft, bizarre cures, and the triggering of paranormal abilities. Many of these elements go completely unnoticed by most researchers, yet they are there, quietly shaping and influencing the rest of us. Rest assured, this is only the tip of the iceberg. There are more striking coincidences ahead, each further revealing the phenomenon's pervasive symbolic dominance. The main cases, the ones that serve as placeholders, have multiple functions. They are like multi-purpose nodes. The first is to create a buzz, to generate a multi-layered public discourse. They begin by delivering main headlines or easy consumable news, but when viewed in the broader context, an intricate web of meanings emerges around them. In the cases that don't enter the mainstream, we find a less obvious linguistic or semiotic marking. Yet other forms of semiotics are still at work, often in even more pervasive ways. In these lower-profile cases, the semiotics take the form of repeated signals, markings, and actions that recur again and again. The phenomenon appears to seed different levels of symbolic engagement. Some cases are loud public performances, others are quiet but potent reinforcements, all serving the same overarching symbolic dominance. This is only the beginning. We will return to the topic of coincidences and encounters in our next works.
They come not for answers, but for echoes, threading names and places like sigils in the mist. Ashes, whisper of minds unmade, remade. Not simple contact, it is a choreography of initiation, and in that theatre, we are the stage.
This discussion is from Danzar Pati's book, Abduction. Are you experienced?